Hi everyone, welcome to HR Debatable. My name is Nelly Verlinden, I'm your host, and today I'm being joined by two fantastic guests, Tracy Spanenberg and Paul Lalonde. Hi Tracy, hi Paul.
Hi Nelly, hi Paul.
Hi Tracy, hi Neely.
Okay, let's start perhaps with a brief introduction. So Tracy, perhaps you can introduce yourself in a few words.
Sure. As you're seeing this, I'm just about leaving the Granite Group. I've been there almost 9 years as the Chief People Officer and embarking on my own journey as a fractional Chief People Officer for the wholesale distribution industry, and doing a little bit more speaking and some other projects that I'm excited to dive into, not during this session, but at some point later.
Very exciting things coming up, Tracy, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Paul, perhaps you can also introduce yourself briefly.
Yeah, Paul Lalonde. I'm the VP of People and Culture at the Community and Economic Development Association in Cook County, Chicago. We're a community action agency that does a lot of low-income and poverty assistance programming for Cook County and portions of Chicago. So light heat programming, weatherization, WIC, affordable housing, and a host of tons of other programs.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right. Before we get started, let me quickly explain for those of you who are perhaps new listeners what we are going to do. In HR Debatable, as the name suggests, we debate about various HR and world of work related statements. I will give some context, then read the statement, and then both Tracy and Paul both choose a position either in favor of or against. And of course, they then get the opportunity to defend their position so that we have an actual debate. And I might play the devil's advocate every now and then to spark the debate further. So Tracy and Paul, do you have any questions?
No, I'm a little afraid, but let's get going.
Yes, let's go indeed. All right, our first theme today is around the return to office push. Since the start of COVID in 2020, the way many of us work has changed dramatically. For a lot of office-based knowledge workers, this means that rather than going into an office 3, 4, or 5 days a week, they are now working from home for at least a couple of days. And while certain people love the fact that they are able to work from the comfort of their homes, others don't. Either because they live in relatively small apartments, or because their partner also works from home, or simply because they do their best work in an actual office surrounded by colleagues. So perhaps in an ideal world, employees get to choose where they want to work as much as possible. Interestingly, we've seen quite a few large organizations starting to push their employees back into the office. Some of the reasons cited for this are the fact that people are more productive and creative when in an office, and that it sparks more innovation. Some say, however, that the real reasons companies want people back in the office have more to do with the significant economic consequences of commercial real estate being empty and dropping in value. McKinsey Global Institute estimates that pandemic shifts could erase as much as 1.3 trillion of real estate value in big cities around the world by 2030. And then there are the downtowns that rely on workers for commerce. All the restaurants and coffee shops that serve breakfast and lunch to white-collar workers, the dry cleaners, the bars where people used to go for a drink after work. These people believe that the return to office push is really about avoiding a commercial real estate apocalypse. And this brings me to our first statement of the day. RTO has nothing to do with productivity or company culture. It's about avoiding a commercial real estate crash. All right, this first statement, I'm going to start, Tracy and Paul, by asking each of you to say whether you agree with the statement or whether you don't agree with it. So, Tracy, let me start with you. Do you say yes or do you say no?
I vote yes.
Paul, what do you vote?
I vote maybe.
All right, I'll get back to that in just a moment. Tracy, perhaps you'd like to elaborate on why you vote yes.
So I like to ask why, why for everything. I ask a lot of questions. When my son was little, we called him the why boy. He asked a lot of questions, unfortunately, or unfortunately, I passed it on to him. So when you ask, like, why are companies demanding this? Not just, oh, come back a couple days a week, but demanding it. And we're seeing a lot of large companies demanding it. When you really get to the why, at least from what I've read and from what I could figure out, that's the why, and it's a very complicated mix of, certainly you want downtowns to thrive. Certainly you want the cities to thrive. My city is the state capital of New Hampshire in the US, and it is fully back. And it is because everyone is back in the state offices, et cetera. So it's fully back. There's some other cities that aren't, but when you get to the heart of it, it's commercial real estate.
Thank you, Paul. Let's get to that maybe of yours.
Well, to piggyback a little bit off what Tracy said, I work in downtown Chicago, which is one of the third largest metropolitan area in the country. And during the pandemic, it was a ghost town. Like, I would still come down here, and it felt like an episode of The Walking Dead, the zombie show, quite honestly. Now, it's not what it was, but it's pretty close to what it was. So people are coming back down, but it just depends on the day of the week. Mondays, which is the day we're recording this, it's a little bit slower. Fridays, very slow. But that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, it's a lot. Now, I guess to the question is, I do think it's actually a mix of both, quite honestly. I believe strongly that whatever you want to call it, culture or innovation, all those things, people need to be around other people. We just really do. Since the cavemen days to today, people interact differently when they're in the same space than when they're not. That being said, does it need to be all the time like it used to be? I don't think it does. I think we need to be more intentional about how we collaborate and work together and get in the same office space. But I do also believe that there's a lot that has to deal with the real estate. Because I just see all these giant buildings and like the Sears Tower, which is the Willis now, but I will go to my death saying it's the Sears Tower. Imagine that tall building with nobody in it. I mean, it would be quite an issue. So,
yes. So something I'm honestly wondering about when it comes to this topic is, wouldn't it be better if companies are just being honest about this? If they were just telling their people, like, listen, this is actually what we are afraid of. Because I think it's also something that we weren't thinking of when we started massively going remote, right? Because we were in some sort of emergency situation. So, people needed to be in a safe place to work. So a lot of people had to start working from home. We didn't think, I think, about the long-term consequences, in the sense that, oh, wow, actually, if we have these downtowns that are empty and all the commerce around it will be affected, and it will cause so much damage. So why can we not just be honest to the people working in our companies and say that actually this is one of the reasons that we would like you to get back to the office? Any thoughts on that? Tracy, I'd like to start with you again.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a perfect world, that would be great. I think in a perfect world, that would get people to come back and maybe want to come back. But since when have we seen giant corporations be honest with their employees? I mean, that's a pretty rare thing. That's a broad brush, but that's a pretty rare thing.
Yeah, valid point, I guess. Paul, any thoughts?
I think similarly. I think it depends on the company. Some are very transparent, some aren't. I think in the world that we're trying to build more trust as employers, it would make a lot of sense to say, hey, look, this is not a black and white issue. This is an incredibly nuanced situation. We need you to come back to the office for various reasons, including that we're afraid that there's going to be this giant real estate collapse, which is a very frightening thing.
Yeah, plus, I mean, this is something that I find this a very fascinating topic. And so I've been chatting about it with several people. And I think something that we also did not think about is also there's a lot of people working in the offices, for instance, making sure that the offices are being maintained. Also, sometimes offices have their own canteens, the people working there. So if nobody comes to the office anymore, it will also mean that these people will lose their jobs eventually. So I think being honest about that might also get people to be wanting to go to the office more often, right?
I 100%, and I don't want it to get lost necessarily too, that in this entire conversation about return to the office and whatever you want to call it, we can't forget that there are, and you alluded to it, Neely, a little bit, that there are some people that want to work from the office, and we can't discount them and just say, well, remote work is great for everybody, because it's not. So companies, I think, unfortunately do this black and white thing where it's all or nothing. And rather than individualize and try to figure out what is the best working arrangement for our people to make them thrive. If that's the office, well, then let's figure out what that looks like. If it's not, if it's somewhere in between, let's figure that out. And that just doesn't seem to be the conversation at the highest level.
I'm going to go a little further. Instead of the remote work debate or the in-office debate, we talk about flexibility. So flexibility, in a perfect world, you go, what do you want to do? What does work look like to you? Where, right? And work is a thing, not a place. And we all know that, but that's easier said than done. So my former workplace was, at the time of the start of the pandemic, had 50 in-person essential businesses. So we were a wholesale establishment where plumbers and HVAC technicians had to come to get their parts. You lost your heat in the middle of the pandemic, we didn't shut down. So we had to figure out a way to do that safely. So we had our central office where people were coming in every day, and then we never shut down completely. We had a couple of people that either felt safer coming into the office because we have to look at that, or like you mentioned, partners were home working and just felt more comfortable doing that. And then we never said, come back full time. So we kind of let people dictate. Most people choose to be in some type of hybrid situation, but we led by choice. And had somebody on my team who wants to be in every day. I had somebody who never wants to be in. And so I love that idea. That's hard in reality.
Yeah. Paul, did you want to add something?
No, I agree. I think when we do go down that path too, trying to maintain equity gets challenging at times, because you're trying to figure out the perfect ratio of in and not in, whatever that flexibility looks like. But yeah, it's just something I think we just have to keep trial and error over time and do our best. That's all we can really do.
And that's on the equities on the employer, right? So we see a lot, we hear a lot like, hey, you're not in the office, so, well, hop on a Zoom call with 25 people in a conference room. And my husband, and Paul knows this, started not too long ago for a nonprofit, started working for a nonprofit. He's a CFO. And if they have a Zoom meeting and not everybody's if they have a meeting and not everyone's in the office, everybody's on Zoom, no matter where you are, because that's not you sitting in front of a camera and everybody else is in the meeting room. So there are little ways like that where you can make it more equitable.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the beauty of this period that we're in right now is that we actually get to figure this stuff out as we go. I think as long as we have the willingness to have an open mind and to figure it out together. And that's nice to basically wrap up this first debate. Thank you both very much.